Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Machiavelli's Prince. And people are going to say, oh, what we're looking at today is we're looking really at chapter 11, which is the end of the first part of the Prince, the first sections. The first 11 books are really the first books about the princes. This is where the things he promised he'd address at the in the beginning of chapter 1, where he gave a kind of brief sketch of what he's going to do. And it's with this chapter he concludes all the principates. In other words, an ecclesiastical principates. Okay, let's deal with this. There only remains at present to reason of ecclesiastical principates, whose difficulty all arise before they are possessed, for they are acquired either by virtue or by fortune, and are maintained without either virtue or fortune. For they are sustained by the ancient orders of religion, which have been so powerful and are of such a quality that they keep their keep their princes in state, and wherever in whatever mode they proceed and live. So, in other words, this is the last of the states he's going to address, but these are the one that is neither. In other words, they all the difficulties arise before they're possessed. Okay, um, and for they are acquired either by virtue, or fortune, but are maintained without virtue or fortune. And maintained by what? Their ancient orders. This is like a hereditary one, right? But not of the family, the orders of a family or dynasty, but rather the ancient orders of religion, which have been so powerful of such a quality that they keep their princes in power in the state in whatever mode they proceed to live, proceed and live in that sense. He goes, these states, these these alone have states which they do not defend, and subjects which they do not govern, and these states by not being defended are never taken away, and subjects by not being governed never care. They never think of alienating themselves from their princes, nor could they do so if they thought of it. Only these princes then are secure and happy. This is a very confusing. What is the ecclesiastical principate? Because, in one sense, we know what the ecclesiastical principates are. The actual ecclesiastical principates of that Machiavelli is speaking of is the principates of the time, that principates or rules that they're governed by the church. The church owns them. All through the German cities and all through the world of this time, there are territories or lands that are owned by the church, and that the church and some of these lands, not only properties, but also duchies and baronies, and like this is these are the papal states around Europe, lands around the Rome, right? These lands were given to the Pope by Pippin when he conquered, but these are now church, and this is going to be also as lands given to the son who was the churchman and given to the church. They become duchies and baronies and things like this, and duchies and or princely states, and Germany and elsewhere that are example of mines in Germany that are controlled by bishops, okay, and archbishops and cardinal archbishops, right? These are the church now appoints who's the new archbishop. Then now some of these become hereditary in a sense, but they were hereditary principates that were turned over to the church, or the church gained control of them somehow, and therefore the church now controls them in that sense. So this is what the real thing is. But is this what Machiavelli you're talking about here? What are ecclesiastics? Because these are what? These are weird situations that at one said, well, they neither come by fortune or virtue. They're acquired either by fortune or virtue, but are maintained by the orders of religion. And the orders of religion and the control by them are so powerful, such a quality that they keep princes in the states, regarding whatever mode they live in, they proceed and live by. And that these are the what? These are the states, which is the second thing, that they do not defend in subjects that they do not govern. States where they do not defend, because the religion itself defends, and which they do not govern. And these states are not being defended, are never taken away. Because they're always the churches, right? That's one thing, an argument. They can never take it away from them. But what? And the subjects not being governed, they don't care because they're not being rude and almost not. They never think of alienating themselves from their princes, nor could they do so if they thought of it, because the church owns it, right? So therefore, this is a weird thing. But only these princes, then are secure and happy. It's a very shocking statement. Only these princes are secure and happy. But since these stand by a superior cause, the superiority of which cause, right, the human mind cannot grasp. This is something beyond the mind of man, right? Cannot grasp. This is the second thing. I've attempted, in other words, Alvarez has a note here, and it's worth paying attention to. La secondo quila regete vigor superior. They attempted to preserve Machiavelli's use of the singular cause, cagion, together with the adjective superiore in the plural. Machiavelli is saying that the ecclesiastic principates are upheld by a superior cause, or that by superior causes, right? He wishes it would seem to have it both ways. That's why he gives. This is why there's grammatical problems with the sentence, because you have what the use of the words singular cause, right? But then the adjectives in the plural, right? That's that weird thing. The human mind cannot grasp stand by a superior cause, the superiority of which causes plurality of that. The superiority of these things are in the plural. The human mind cannot grasp, right? And he says he wishes that they seem to have it both ways. I interpret this grammatical error as a desire to indicate that one cause of the biblical tradition, is in a certain respect to be equated with the many divine causes of the Gentile tradition, right? There's two traditions. The Gentile tradition is one God. The biblical tradition is one God, whereas the Gentile or the pagan tradition, there's many gods, many causes, one God, many causes. So the duality of grammar is the point to this problem, this contestation or difference of the theological, this debate between the biblical tradition of the Jews, Christians, and Muslims against the pagans, the many causes versus the single cause, right? And respect to be equated with the many causes, and in other words, and which is the many gods of the pagans, right? He says, thus the superiority of either a cause or the causes is equally inaccessible to human mind. In other words, the superiority of either a cause or the causes, in other words, is equally inaccessible to the human mind. The human mind cannot grasp these truly divine things. They're outside either the single cause or the many causes. I shall leave off speaking of them, and since they are exalted and maintained by God, it would be the office of a presumptuous and bold man to discuss them. I'm not going to talk about them. But, he says, nevertheless, if someone demanded of me how it came to be that the church came to such greatness in temporal affairs, in other words, In other words, he's saying, I'm not going to talk about these things. It's presumptuous. But you're going to ask me something else. You're not going to ask me about, it's presumptuous to talk about this question of the causes of the ecclesiastical part. This is presumptuous and a bold man to discuss them. But then you just ask me a question: how did the church come to greatness in temporal affairs? And since one finds that prior to Alexander, the Italian pontificate, he goes, um, that the Italian potentates, uh, this is interesting that the page distinction here is, ooh, um, and not only those who are called potentates, but every baron and lord, no matter how petty, so little esteemed her in the temporal. And now a king of France trembles before her, and that she has been able to drive him from Italy and ruin the Venetians. Even though all of this is well known, it does not seem to me superfluous to recall a good part of it to memory. So back, remember that all the way back in chapter 3, right? That he talked about this problem, right? About the rise, the power of the church. Um, Before the Alexander, this church was held in very little respect. But after Alexander, and then the rise, through the rise of Julius, right? That from Alexander onwards, the church has become powerful, right? That they're able to make the king of France tremble before her, and able to drive him from Italy and ruin the Venetians. Before Charles, king of France, passed into Italy, this province was under the imperium of the Pope. The Venetians, the imperium of the Pope, the Venetians, the king of Naples, and the Duke of Milan, and the Florentines. These potentates had to have two principal cares: one, that a foreigner not enter Italy with arms; the other, that no one among themselves seize more of the state. Again, 5 here, footnote 5. One of the this is on. In other words, again, this is in other words used the state. The state, many this refers to the body politics or territory of the whole, right? Of those whom they have had to, of those whom they had to take the most care were the Pope and the Venetians. And to all, in other words, the one who had taken more care was the Pope and the Venetians. Why? To restrain the Venetians, all the others had to unite, as occurred in the defense of Fiera. Right? The Roman barons served to keep the Pope down, and since they were divided into two factions, the Orsini and the Colonnas, there was always the cause of disruption between them. So therefore, the two factions of this, in other words, the barons kept the Pope down, and since they were divided into factions, the Orsini and the Colonnas, there was always a cause of disruption between them. But standing with arms in hand before the eyes of the pontiff, but standing with arms in hand before the eyes of the pontiff, they kept the pontiff weak and infirm. So in other words, that the barons, even though they were divided, they couldn't get control, but they had arms, and they stand before the pontiff with arms in hand. Before the pontiff, they kept him weak and infirm. And although the spirited pope rose up at times like Sixtus, Sixtus the fourth, both born Francesco de Revele, was Pope from 1417 to 1418, he imitated the policy of bringing the northern papal states more directly under the Pope's control. His name was connected with the Pazzi controversy of 1484 against the Medici. The hanging of the Archbishop Centrality by the Florentines as a co-conspirator led to the Pope's excommunication of Lorenzo by laying on the interdict of the Florentines in a war. This is again talked about in the Florentine histories. So the Pope, Sixtus is the first one to do it. Yet neither fortune nor wisdom could ever release him from those incommodities. So in other words, even Sixtus, who was able to cause some change, was still never released him from the incommodities of having these two factions holding him weak and infirm. The brevity of their lives was the cause. In other words, the popes were elected old, and because they were old, they had maybe short reigns. Um, um, the brevity of their lives was their cause. For in the 10 years, which is on the average the length of the Pope's reign, he might with difficulty put down one of the factions, and if, for instance, one had almost extinguished the colonnades, another Pope rose up hostile to the Orsini, would permit the colonnades to recover, and the Orsini would not be in time to extinguish them. Them. 7. That is, the Orsini could not move quickly enough to expedite the Colonnelli when the Pope favorable to the colonnades were elected. Right, so the different factions would elect popes at different times, and I became, in other words, even though I wasn't of the same faction, the fact that I didn't like you or you were too powerful, I thought I was like this, so I would welcome the other faction to turn against you. So therefore, they couldn't extinguish them in time. The Pope or the new Pope or the remaining of the faction, while the Pope could use his power to protect the other faction against what he didn't like. This was this was what made the temporal force of the Pope to be so little esteemed in Italy. In other words, the Pope was not esteemed because he was weak and effeminate; he couldn't do it, and that as long as those two that the length of time was of such that he was not able to exterminate or just eliminate both factions at that time, right? And he would always need one to undo the other, but then that would make the other one stronger so that the other factions could not remove themselves, right? Then Alexander the Sixth rose up, who, of all pontiffs that have ever been, showed how much a pope with money and with forces could prevail. In other words, he was unlike he had money and he had forces because of that money, right? That he could buy people and do things and therefore force it. He could prevail. With Duke Valentino as his instrument, in other words, this is a wonderful line, his instrument. Um, Footnote 8, note that Caesare is only an instrument of his father here, right? Caesare here is now an instrument. Duke Valentino is his instrument. And the passage of the French into Italy as the occasion. He did all those things which I have discussed above with respect to the action of the Duke. So it's not the Duke who did those things. It's really Alexandra. And Alexandra, it was the church through Alexander, through the instrument of the Duke as his instrument. It's an interesting point here. So we have to understand, we have to distinguish between Caesare himself or Caesare an instrument. Although his intent might not have been, to make the church great, but rather the Duke. What he did, nevertheless, gave rise to the greatness of the church. In other words, Alexander's intention was to make was not. In other words, we have to distinguish between the intent, what was intended versus what was done. Caesare did not intend to make the church great; he intended to make the Duke great. But by doing what he did to make Caesare great, he made the church great. Okay, unintended consequences. Okay, it's a classic unintended consequence problem. And he never, and what he did, nevertheless, gave rise to the greatness of the church. And with Alexander's death and the extinction of the Duke, in other words, the Duke because he became less powerful. In other words, the extinction is not because once the Pope died and the Duke's authority lost, the church became heir to his toils. In other words, all the toils of both of Alexander now became what the church benefited of the toils. And when Pope Julius, again, remember what this was Cesare's mistake. Cesare helps elect Julius, thinking that he'll forgive me by making him powerful. In other words, that famous discussion: don't assume that some of you harmed will forgive you, right? Particularly those of great ambition. Right? All the way back, that famous line. Go back there. Julius, and he found it. In other words, then came Pope Julius, and he found the church great, for she now possessed all the Romalia. The barons of Rome were extinguished, and the blows struck by Alexander had annihilated the factions. And moreover, he also found a way open to a mode of accumulating money which which previously to Alexander never been used. In other words, Julius finds a new mode of money making, okay, that even Alexander didn't use, okay. This is, what is this? Now, this is 9. A tax of 1/10 was imposed on all Christendom by a papal bull of 1500, ostensibly for the crusades against the Turks. Alexander had made his cardinals pay for their offices, and he acclaimed the right of confiscate the wealth of those cardinals whom died. Machiavelli seems to be referring, however, to the sale of indulgences in ecclesiastical offices. So even though Alexander used many things, like a tax, Christendom tax, tax on all Christendom, these mediums, these are the things that Alexander did. This is footnote 9. But then his thing is indulgences. Julius uses the indulgences and the sale of ecclesiastical offices, something that even Alexander did not do. Okay, new mode and found ways of open to a mode of accumulating money which previous Alexander had never used, as indulgences. Indulgences will play an important role. Julius's use of indulgences will be the cause by which the German princes will rebel against. This is Luther. This is the rise of Luther. I mean, what Julius does with the sailing of indulgences leads to an abuse of indulgences all through the rise of this time. What was only an extreme practice for extraordinary officers of the church now became a means of generating money, and he was selling it, and the sale of ecclesiastical offices, which then would the sale of those offices would then be then what they would do is that the office holder will then usually use indulgences to raise the tax, raise the money to pay for those offices, as Cardinal Mainz himself did, right? Which would led to Luther. So this is a very important point that Julius has given new ways of money making that were unthink of. These things Julius not only continued but increased. He thought to gain the Bologna for himself and to extinguish the Venetians, to chase the French out of Italy. He succeeded in all these enterprises, and much to his praise. And all these things were done to increase the church, and not any private man. In other words, again, this is that famous line. He does it. Everything here Julius does is Julius II on his enterprises. Right. This would be chapter 25 of the Prince in that sense. Julius is doing everything for the church greatness of the church, not for a private man. He also kept the Orsini and Colonia factions within the same limits which he found them. Alexander destroyed both of them, so therefore they were his, and they were controlled by him forever. And although there were some leaders among them who wanted from time to time to rebel, two things restrained them. One, the greatness of the church, which dismayed them. Others, not having cardinals of their own, for the cardinals are the origins for the cardinals are the origins of the tumult among the Roman factions. In other words, they don't have commons. I can't do this. They don't have the. In other words, he removed the cardinals. They have no card. The two factions have no cardinals, and without cardinals, they have no ability to control who's pope. Okay, so therefore, whenever they had cardinals, these factions will never remain quiet. And these cardinals nourish factions in Rome and elsewhere. And the barons are then forced to defend them, right? That's the thing about this. The barons will then defend the cardinals. But if they don't have cardinals, they can't deal with it, right? There's no response to them. There's no ability, and the barons will not defend them, right? Thus, from the ambitions of the prelates arise all the discords and tumults among the barons. So that the barons will only act because of the interest of factions. The factions of the barons are tied to the factions of their ability to exercise the power in the church, and that's through the election of the pope. But they can't. The barons have no influence without the prelates. So without the prelates, there's no ability to influence. So no prelates. There's no. The barons have no way of intrigue, and therefore the baron intrigue does not affect the pope, and therefore the pope, by his greatness and power, is able to do that. That's what this is. This is why what Alexander, through his instrument Cesare, did made the church so powerful, and this is the danger that he wants to talk about here. His Holiness Pope Leo then found. Remember, Leo is what? What is it? He's not a Borgia. He's not that. He is what? He is a Medici, right? A Medici. Okay, the Medici Pope. So Holiness Pope Leo then finds this pontificate most powerful, and one hopes that if his predecessors made her great with arms, he, with his goodness and infinite other virtues, will make her great and venerated. Right, Pope Leo. There's a little bit of flattery. Remember, it's a Medici Pope, so he needs to be nice to this. He's flattering the Medici a little bit. It's written for a Medici, so it's he's flattering them. But Leo inherits Julius's great empire, who with predecessor made her great with arms. He, with his goodness and infinite other virtues. And notice that infinite virtues doesn't speak about the vices. This infinite virtues will make her great and venerated. That's how he ends this, praising this little flattery of the Medici. Is a very interesting thing. He talks about the greatness. What is the greatness of the church? What is talked about ecclesiastical principle? We don't get a discussion of ecclesiastical principle. This thing that he begins the first paragraphs of, we're left with mystery about. What is it? What is truly ecclesiastical principles? Rather, we get a discussion of the greatness of the church. Why did the church become great? And the greatness of the church lies it lies in the particular circumstances and the actions of Alexander the Sixth, who then and what he does and the consequences of what he does. And even though it's not done he does it now. He's not doing it for the greatness of the church. He's doing it for the greatness of his son, and his family. But what ends up happening is that it's done. It's done in the name of the church, and because it's when he dies, Cesare does not make their decision, and therefore everything is left in the hands of the successor pope, who then who disposes of Cesare, not necessarily kills him, but removes him of his authority. And then what happens is everything now turns in the favor of this pope, who has all the instruments and means to do it. And that he will then. And now this will be chapter 25. I think this is one of the discussions of Julius in that sense and other things. So Julius is a very interesting power, and he makes the church great, and his greatness through arms. Always remember, Julius is portrayed as the pope in armor. He's the warrior pope. He's seen as the pope that will fight and will raise the arm. If Alexander himself doesn't go to battle, Alexander's arm basically uses his son. In the same way, we can say, does he use? Remember his instrument. does Alexander, the difference between Alexander and Caesare with his Marco di Orco, who then dismoves it. Caesare cannot be dealt with in the same way as Marco di Orco. In other words, Alexander cannot deal with Caesare the way Caesare dealt with Marco di Orco. Very interesting problem, right? But he is dealt with. He is dealt with by being ignored. He's not extinguished. He's not killed. This is where the Machiavelli insinuates that he is killed. He dies. He dies later in Spain and Navarre, fighting for Navarre. But after he lost after losing the situation, because hoping that Julius will let him do what he wants. No, Julius cuts him out, strips him of his power and authority, and saying, "Listen, these lands are mine. Go." And the Spanish protected him, and he goes off to Spain and dies there. Right. This is the story of the instead the chapter of 11 ends up becoming a discussion of I can't talk about what makes ecclesiastic principles the way they are, but I can talk about the rise, how the church became great in our time. So that's a very interesting problem. And what are ecclesiastic principles? This is the question. This weird principle that he talks about early in that first paragraph. It's something that can be, it's never lost. It's ruled by people. In other words, never. That doesn't really matter on the ruler. They rule without the people that the subjects don't really care because they're not they have no influence. In other words, this weird. Let's go back to that thing and go look at it. It's a weird thing that forces us to think, what kind of place is this thing? If we had to think about this, what is the ecclesiastic principle? And its power is something that we cannot, our minds, it's something that he can't discuss it because because the sources of its causes or cause are beyond the scope that the mind of men can grasp, right? So instead of discussing and addressing something that's beyond the scope of men, he will give us a discussion of something that the human mind can grasp. That is why the church became great. And by doing this echoes what he does. He moves. In other words, this is very much the modern move, right? Instead of talking about these grasps, these universals, grasp the truth simply. In other words, it's that instead of taking our minds to the things that we cannot know with any kind of precision or grasp, to know the truths, know the ultimate, most highest truths, that which we don't have the means of grasping fully or knowing fully, but rather to aim our sights a little lower to the things we can know and can know can grasp. Our minds can grasp and know. In other words, move our sights from the high, which our minds cannot grasp, to the things lower that we can grasp. And this is the Machiavellian kind of this is the modern turn, we can say, right? From the high to the low. And I think that is and the switch here is that we cannot grasp that. So I'm not going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about what we can grasp and what we can know. But let's think. But what is this ecclesia? Is the ecclesiastic thing the city and speech of Plato's Republic and the best city, the best regime, or the best city in that sense, the classical sense, the regime that's talked about by Plato and his laws? This is the one that won by the gods or by nature. But can we know what the mind of God, the gods, or the ultimate ontology of being knows? That's the problem here, right? We cannot grasp these things. And because we cannot grasp these things, we cannot know them. So Machiavelli prefers to lower his sights to the things the minds of men can know. So let's stop here. This is a good place to stop because we ended our chapters. We end our section here, the first part of the Prince. The next part of the Prince will be the discussion of arms, which will be the next 4 chapters dealing with the arms, which again are clearly 12, 13, 12, 13, and 14. Okay, that's the 3 chapters, right? The 3 chapters, 12, 13, and 14 on discussion of arms. And then that leads us to chapter 15, which is begins the new thing section, quality of the princes, um, which deals with the nature of the so we end the discussion of principates that began the book. Now we're going into a new stage. We're going to be talking about arms, the question of arms next time we meet. Okay, so let's stop there, and if you have any comments or questions, please put them below, and I'll respond to them in the next thing. Next time we will meet, or when I see them, I respond to them in the comments or things like that. When I see them, if you liked it, hit like button. Hit the like button. It helps the algorithm. If you like what we did here, hit the column. Please hit the column if you liked it because it helps the algorithm grow, gets more attention to this. We don't get many people who like us. We get people come here, watch, and they'll sit and learn something. Maybe they'll learn something and they'll but hit the like button. It helps. Another thing you can do is you can share this and share it far and wide. Share it on social media, share it on your account you liked it, share it to your friends. If you're here for the first time or recently been coming but have not yet subscribed, please subscribe. It helps the algorithm. Please subscribe. Please encourage people, friends or people interested in these topics to come check us out and to come check us out, but also to help the channel grow and get attention. So please hit the subscription button and subscribe. You get notifications of new posts and things like that. Another thing you do, okay, if you didn't like it, you can always say, no, I don't like it, but say why in the comments. That way people can benefit from it. This is what we're here to learn. We're here to learn, okay? Another thing is that you want to follow me on social media. The social media links are below. If you want to know more about me as a scholar and check out my research and check out my scholarship, you can do so through the academic social media links below that. And if you want to know, you want to help me to do what I do, you want to contribute, you want to financially contribute in that sense, mildly, nothing big, and I think you can do so through either Patreon or Subscribestar. The URLs are listed below, or you can buy one of my books. Currently 3 books available. You can order them through your bookstore. If you want to order through the bookstore, maybe they'll do it for you. Or if you want to help your local bookstore in that sense, or you want to go through a local online seller through like Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or any of those distributors like that, Libris and things like that. Do that, or you can order it directly through the publisher. That's another way you can do so. That's it. That's what we can do. We'll check out next time. We'll go look at chapter 12 about arms. We'll talk about arms, and that'll be it. Well, take care. See you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.